Have you ever felt that there's something beyond what your eyes can see? As if there were an invisible layer of reality waiting to be accessed, but your brain simply doesn't know how? Modern neuroscience is beginning to prove something that once sounded impossible. There is a measurable state where the human brain literally changes the way it perceives the world. And this state can be achieved intentionally. No faith, no rituals, just science applied to the mind. Researchers from MIT and Stanford call this phenomenon neural coherence, a rare alignment between the brain's electrical waves and the body's physiological responses. When it happens, the individual experiences what scientists describe as a dimensional shift in perception. Time seems to slow down, intuition sharpens, and mental clarity reaches extraordinary levels. It's not fantasy, it's advanced biology in action. For decades, people believed the brain merely reacted to the environment, processing stimuli and storing information. But new discoveries show the opposite. The brain is an active creator of reality. It doesn't just interpret the world, it builds it. Every thought, emotion, and electrical impulse translates into measurable patterns of energy and information that together form the foundation of conscious experience. In other words, the way you think literally shapes the universe you perceive. This video is the meeting point between neuroscience and quantum physics, two fields that together begin to decode the architecture of reality. We'll explore how the brain can access higher states of perception, what happens when its neural networks synchronize, and most importantly, the scientific method capable of triggering this transformation. Prepare to understand in practical and rational terms what it means to live in a higher dimension of the mind. Because what you're about to discover isn't just a theory, it's the key to reprogramming how you perceive time, space, and yourself. From this moment on, every thought will be more than an idea. It will be a force capable of shaping what you call reality. When we talk about a higher dimension, we're not referring to something mystical or unreachable. Modern neuroscience shows that the human brain operates in different states of consciousness, and each state alters how we perceive time, space, and reality itself. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute have observed that the brain doesn't simply react to the environment, it reconstructs it, filtering billions of stimuli in seconds. What we call reality is, in truth, a projection of our neurological state. Neuroimaging studies reveal that when we enter deep focus, meditation, or creative flow, areas of the prefrontal and parietal cortex reduce activity. It's as if the brain temporarily turns off the sense of self, opening the door to an expanded perception of the world. This phenomenon, known as default mode network deactivation, is the key to understanding what many call a consciousness shift. It's not a supernatural event. It's a measurable change in how the brain processes information. In these conditions, subjective time slows down. People report feeling as if they've stepped outside their bodies or are observing their own minds from afar, when in fact, they're experiencing a temporary collapse of the ego, measured through specific brainwave patterns. Theta and gamma waves synchronize, creating what scientists call neural coherence. This state is linked to the perception of unity in the sense that everything is connected, a deeply transformative and real experience for the brain. Quantum physics, on the other hand, shows that subatomic particles exist in multiple states until they're observed. This discovery inspired cognitive scientists to propose that human consciousness might function as a collapser of possibilities. In other words, the observer doesn't just perceive reality, they participate in shaping it. When the brain achieves coherence, it becomes an organized field capable of selecting potential realities, a concept still debated but supported by evidence in neurophysics and information theory. This dialogue between neuroscience and physics suggests that accessing a higher dimension isn't about traveling somewhere else, it's about shifting the level of consciousness processing. In simple terms, the more coherent the brain, the broader the range of possibilities we can perceive and create. It's like stepping out of a dark room and realizing the world was always there, you just needed enough light to see it. The key is learning to turn on that light within your neural system. In the next topic, we'll explore how neuroscience identified the only method capable of triggering this coherence intentionally, and why so few can sustain it for long. When the brain enters coherence, something extraordinary happens. Billions of neurons that once fired chaotically begin to oscillate in harmony. Imagine an orchestra where every instrument plays at its own tempo. The result is noise and confusion. But when the conductor raises the baton, everything synchronizes, and chaos turns into music. That conductor is your focus. Science shows that the simple act of directing attention aligns neural networks and alters the brain's electrical field. Harvard. Researchers confirmed that mindful attention reorganizes synaptic connections and increases gray matter density in the hippocampus, the region linked to memory and awareness. This means that every time you focus deeply, you're literally reshaping your brain. The most effective method for accessing higher mental dimensions begins here. Controlling attention until mental noise dissolves. At that point, the brain stops reacting and starts creating. Neuroscience calls this experiential neuroplasticity. With every focused thought, new connections are strengthened while old patterns fade. This process can be observed in real time through functional MRI scans, which show the brain reshaping itself based on the quality of attention. The more coherent the focus, the more stable the neural system, and the greater the ability to perceive realities once invisible. It's like changing the frequency of a radio station. The signal was always there, you just had to tune in. But why is it so hard to maintain that state? Because the human brain was designed for survival, not evolution. It scans for threats, judges, compares, and analyzes, breaking internal harmony in the process. When the mind divides itself between past and future, the present disappears and coherence is lost. That's why accessing a higher dimension requires training the brain to stay in a creative state where focus is stable and perception is expansive. Neuroscientists call this the flow state, a pattern where the prefrontal cortex lowers self-criticism and the body releases dopamine and anandamide, chemicals tied to fulfillment and peak performance. In this state, the brain operates with minimal electrical resistance and maximum energy efficiency. It's here that the boundaries between thought and reality begin to blur. In the next topic, you'll discover how to induce this state with scientific precision, and why it's the bridge between an ordinary brain and one capable of reshaping its own perceived reality. Modern science has reached a fascinating conclusion. The only proven method to access higher states of consciousness is training conscious attention combined with controlled breathing. This isn't mystical meditation, it's brain engineering. The University of California demonstrated that synchronizing the breathing rhythm with heart rate creates a physiological coherence that immediately reorganizes the brain's electrical patterns. It's like tuning a quantum device to capture signals previously out of range. When you inhale deeply and keep your attention in the present, you activate the vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the body and regulates the autonomic nervous system. This process reduces emotional noise and stabilizes neural oscillations. The result? A brain perfectly balanced between focus and relaxation, the exact state neuroscientists call the integration window. Within this window, perception expands and cognitive processing reaches levels that once seemed impossible. Neurophysiology researchers call this cardiorespiratory coherence. In simple terms, it's the art of making the brain, heart, and body vibrate at the same electrical frequency. The result is the activation of areas linked to intuition, creativity, and complex problem solving. It's the point where the mind stops repeating old patterns and starts creating new mental realities. a measurable, reproducible, and profoundly transformative phenomenon. Joe Dispenza describes this state as lifting the brain above the body. It's not a metaphor. During these moments, cerebral blood flow increases by up to 70% in regions linked to visualization and planning. The brain stops operating as a recorder of the past and becomes a projector of future possibilities. That's where the term quantum reality shift makes sense, because the nervous system literally changes how it interprets the world. The beauty of this method lies in its simplicity. 3 minutes of absolute focus and rhythmic breathing already begin to generate neural coherence. The secret is consistency, repetition until the brain recognizes this state as the new normal. With each session, the neural system records the experience and starts seeking it naturally, as a preferred pattern. It's neuroplasticity in action, reshaping your perception of the possible. In the next topic, you'll understand why so few people can sustain this coherence, and how the mind's own defense system prevents the brain from staying in a higher state for long. Most people never maintain neural coherence because the brain has a defense mechanism called mental homeostasis. It's designed to preserve what's familiar, even if that means limiting growth. When you start changing your neural pattern, the brain perceives it as a threat to stability and triggers resistance. Distractions, doubts, and the feeling that nothing is working appear. That's where most people give up, unaware they're one step away from real transformation. Neuropsychology studies show that the brain goes through predictable learning cycles. First comes discomfort, old synapses clash with new ones. Then reorganization, the neural system struggles to restore balance. Finally comes consolidation, the new pattern stabilizes. Most people never reach this last stage because they mistake the chaos phase for failure. But that's exactly when transformation is happening at the biological level. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for conscious thought, tries to stay in control while the limbic system reacts with fear. It's an invisible battle between the rational and emotional mind. Neuroscience calls it top-down inhibition, explaining why changing habits, beliefs, or perspectives is so hard. The brain must break old connections and form new ones, which requires energy, focus, and repetition. Without consistency, it reverts to the old pattern, even if that pattern causes pain. The good news is that this process can be observed and trained. Researchers discovered that after 21 days of daily focus and breathing practice, the brain begins to prefer coherence. Amygdala activity, the fear center, decreases, while the anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for conscious decision-making, thickens. This means change isn't just mental, it's physical. The brain literally rebuilds itself from the inside out. Self-sabotage then isn't a flaw, it's protection. The challenge is staying aware long enough to cross the chaos phase without giving up. It's like a rocket breaking through gravity. The greatest energy is spent at launch, until the new trajectory becomes natural. The brain is the rocket. Consciousness is the fuel. In the next topic, we'll explore what happens when neural coherence becomes a permanent state, and how it redefines what we call reality. When the brain achieves sustained coherence, it begins to operate on a completely different level of perception. Cognitive neuroscience studies show that in this state, the brain's hemispheres synchronize perfectly, resulting in mental clarity, expanded creativity, and a sense of control over one's destiny. Brainwaves stop competing and start complementing each other, forming a stable pattern of energy and information. That's when humans stop merely reacting to life and start directing their own biological scripts. Quantum physics helps explain what neuroscience observes. When the mind reaches coherence, it ceases to be just a receiver of stimuli and becomes an emitter of patterns. The synchronized brain generates more stable electric fields that influence the body, the environment, and even the behavior of others. It's the principle of resonance. Coherent systems attract other coherent systems. In practice, it means the external world starts mirroring the internal state of the observer. This is the real meaning of the quantum reality shift. It's not about jumping to another universe, but about changing how the brain interprets and responds to this one. When perception changes, the world changes with it. The individual begins to see opportunities where there were obstacles, calm where there was fear, and intelligence where there was reaction. Reality doesn't change through magic. It reconfigures itself through conscious neuroplasticity. Scientists call this persistent cognitive reinterpretation. After repeating new neural routes long enough, the brain builds a structural base for high-performance thoughts and emotions. What once required effort becomes natural. The mind aligns with the logic of the physical universe: stability, balance, and expansion. At that point, humans stop being prisoners of their automatic patterns and become engineers of their own reality. Ultimately, neuroscience shows that there are no separate dimensions in the cosmos, only levels of perception within the same reality. The higher dimension is therefore a shift in neural frequency. When the brain learns to remain coherent, it discovers the power to reinterpret everything that exists, shaping the world from the inside out. That's the bridge between science and consciousness. Proof that evolution doesn't happen outside of us, but within the very system we use to perceive reality. And that's where Mindifest stands. Not in mystical promises, but in scientific evidence that the power to change reality has always belonged to those who dare to think differently. The higher dimension isn't a place, it's a state. And it begins the moment you decide to take control of your own mental code. What neuroscience is revealing is both simple and revolutionary. The human brain is not just an observer of reality, it's the main programmer. Neural coherence, once seen as mystical, is now measurable in labs. When you learn to stabilize your attention, breathe rhythmically, and sustain focus, your nervous system literally changes how it interprets the world. And this shift isn't symbolic. It's physiological, electrical, and quantum. Imagine a computer finally discovering the source code it runs on. That's what happens when the brain enters coherence. It realizes that the limit of reality is the limit of perception. Every time you silence mental noise and hold your attention in the now, thousands of synaptic connections reorganize to build a new model of the world. The brain stops replaying the past and starts projecting the future. And the more coherent it becomes, the greater its ability to create. Quantum physics only confirms what neuroscience is beginning to measure. Conscious observation alters matter's behavior. This means reality isn't fixed, it's dynamic, molded by the observer's mental state. The outer world is, in truth, a reflection of the inner one. When the brain learns to sustain neural coherence, the universe responds in sync, reflecting more organized, creative, and harmonious patterns. The dimensional shift, therefore, is a shift in perspective. This is the scientific foundation of what we call the quantum reality shift. It's not about escaping the world, but perceiving it from a higher point of awareness, where you stop being a victim of circumstances and become the engineer of your own destiny. The real leap doesn't happen outside you, but within the invisible connections that map your brain. And this is where everything converges. Neuroscience isn't just explaining consciousness. It's proving, with data, that the power to change reality has always been in the hands of those who dare to think differently. The higher dimension isn't a location, it's a frequency, and it begins the moment you consciously decide to take control of your own mental code.